Hello and welcome back to Millennial Mental Health Channel. You know, Eddie, are we all about stories on this show?
I think you want me to say yes. So yes.
Good pickup on my cue there, Eddie. Yes, we are all about stories. And today we have a really amazing guest that we are excited to introduce you to because she has a really cool story and something that we want to share with you guys and something we think that you guys will be able to relate with, identify with. Eddie met our current guests on all his TV stuff that he does. You know, he's just on TV so often it gets hard to keep up with all of that.
It was two times. That was it.
It was two amazing times. But Emily Burris is a morning news anchor and the host and let me start over. Emily Burris is a news anchor and host in Portland, Oregon. She moved to the Northwest when she joined the KOIN 6 News team as a reporter in December of 2018. Before moving to Portland, she graduated from the University of Florida and began her local news career in the Sunshine State, covering everything from the 2016 presidential election in that key swing state to several major hurricanes to hit the southeast U.S. Growing up as a Navy brat, she spent much of her childhood in Southern California and moved around quite a bit, spending time on both coasts. When she's not working, you can find her pounding the pavement with her dog, Samwise, which is a great name for a dog. Just watched Lord of the Rings the other day. Where she's also teaching workout classes at Pure Bar South Waterfront. Staying active allows her to take full advantage of Portland's incredible food, wine, and craft beer scene. She also loves hiking and camping and exploring the Pacific Northwest. Everyone, you can find her on emily.burris@koin.com or connect with her on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Please welcome onto the show, Miss Emily Burris.
Woo!
Hi, guys. Thanks so much for
on.
having me.
Yes, of course. Justin, so real quick, if Justin was a real Oregonian, he would know it's actually pronounced coin 6, not KOIN. So that's your one mistake for the show. That's all.
That's
My
okay.
bad.
You can edit it. I won't tell anyone.
No, we're keeping it so we can shame him later.
It'll just say, Emily Burris is on coin 6.
Coin 6 news. Yeah.
But the actual...
Just drop that in there.
Yeah. Well, again, Emily, thank you for coming on the show. Like Justin mentioned, Emily's had me on a couple of times on her show, which has been an amazing opportunity. So I thought it would be great to have her on. She's talked about her own personal mental health journey on her Instagram and social media. So she's graciously agreed to kind of share her story here with us today. We'll kind of just start with the first question. We have a bunch lined up for today. I'll ask you the first one. A little different than we typically will have other mental health professionals. So this is a little different for us. So maybe you could fill us in on what is the process like to become an anchor / reporter? Is there a difference between the two titles? What is the process? Give us all the details. What did people say back in the day? The 411. Give us all that.
Right, the 411, the scoop. Okay, I'm your source for this podcast. Yeah. So there's a couple different ways that people get into news. I'll try to keep it short, but I actually went to school for journalism. I went to the University of Florida, go Gators, which has a great J school. I went in actually not, yeah, there we go. If you can't see it, Eddie's doing the Gator chomp. That's great. So I actually didn't know when I got to college, what I wanted to do with my life. I was one of those kids who was an honor student, straight A's, school was always my thing. And I was just always doing the next assignment and doing the test in front of me and all of that. And I kind of got to college, and that's where you have that realization of oh, but what do I want the rest of my life to be? And I realized I'm not going to be in school forever. What do I do? So through some trial and error and some gen eds and some things that I liked and some things I didn't, I kind of found my way over to the College of Journalism and Communications by my end of sophomore year. And was just really lucky to already be at a school that had some amazing resources. Started working at the local NPR station that was run out of the college and the PBS station, WUF-TV. So we produced a student-run newscast. I kind of learned the ropes as a reporter, decided that being a musical theater kid, I had grown up doing some theater and debate and had always kind of found a stage and liked to talk. And so I figured that TV, might be the journalism route for me. So it ended up just really working out well. I graduated and started in Gainesville, Florida. I got my first job at the local ABC affiliate there. And Gainesville is considered a pretty small television market. So when you talk about local news, there are about 200 markets in the country. New York is number 1, LA is number 2, Chicago's number 3. It goes all the way down to somewhere in Montana that is like market 212. So yeah, so it's, the higher the number, the smaller the market. Gainesville was market 167 when I worked there. So wow. Small town. So started out, covering small town festivals and fairs and small town crime. And after a couple of years, I was promoted from a reporter to morning anchor. Did that for a couple of years. Moved to a bigger market, Fort Myers, Florida, which is, if you don't know, it's on the Gulf Coast of Florida, just south of Tampa. So it's a medium-sized television market. Not quite a big city, but there's a little more going on. And so in all, I was in Florida news for about 7 years and did everything from edit video to shoot my own stories to anchor the newscast to being live out in the field, all kinds of different things. And then from there, I moved out to Portland, Oregon. I wanted a change and looked like a great opportunity. I wanted to come to the West Coast. They were hiring for a reporter here in Portland, and they worked out really well. I got a job at Coin, and a couple of years later, was once again promoted to a morning show. So now I'm back to doing the morning wake up, all kinds of stuff super early in the morning. So that was my journey, kind of starting small, working my way up, going from reporter to anchor a couple times. Some folks do it another way where if they want to go to the network, if they want to go to a big city, they might go start out behind the camera, working as an editor or a writer or a producer. And getting a chance to eventually, be in front of the camera, find some different roles at the same station. So there's lots of different paths. And I'm sure much like many other careers, your degree is not always as make or break as you think it's going to be. A lot of people go into college and think, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? This is going to dictate what I can do for the rest of my life. And what you learn along the way is there are lots of applicable skills that you learn from lots of different things, and it really can depend on where you apply yourself, the connections you make along the way, the internships. I have met people that now work in every market across the country. We always talk about, the 6 degrees of separation. It's even smaller in TV news. Someone here can, start in Portland and I'll say, oh, where'd you come from? And they say, oh, I was at the station in Colorado. Oh, do you know so-and-so? Oh yeah, I worked with them in Orlando. It's crazy how you make those connections along the way.
Okay, I have to ask, what number is Portland?
So Portland is market, I think we're 21 now, I believe. Oh, top 25, yeah. It's a big, because we actually cover, so when you look at the Portland, Oregon news market, we don't just cover Portland, Oregon. Our signal extends north into Southwest Washington, so Vancouver, up to probably about a third of the way up the state of Washington before Seattle's market picks it up. We cover a little bit out to Eastern Oregon as well, maybe not quite to Madras, and then south to Salem, Eugene, Corvallis. We reach a little bit of that market as well, and then out to the coast of Oregon. So we are a lot of the state, and then we're also, Portland, which is Oregon's biggest population center.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense, because sometimes I'll be watching like the evening news, and I get stuff for like Camas or like Vancouver. I'm like, I don't care about that, but now it makes sense.
They're watching the same thing going, I don't care about Portland.
That's true. And it feels like 80% of the show is on.
We got to give everybody a little something.
That's fair. All right.
Well, Emily, thank you for telling us your story and how you got to where you are. I always find that a fascinating part of the show. We like to ask people what they got degrees in, how they ended up where they are. But next question is, where do you want to go? How far do you want to take this? So do you want to go national news? Do you want to switch? Or what are your ideas? What are your long-term goals?
That's a great question. Honestly, I'm really happy here. I love the West Coast. I love the Pacific Northwest. There are so many things here that are just things I love to do. Being outside, being able to be outside in all 4 seasons. Because one of the reasons I didn't want to stay in Florida was it's very hot and very humid almost the entire year. We have two seasons. There's like not quite summer, and then oh my god, summer. So I just was not a fan of being hot and sweaty and humid all the time. So I love that you get a variety of things out here on the West Coast, and I get my skiing in the winter, some fun snowshoe hiking and camping in the summer, stand-up paddleboard, all these fun things. Portland is a great town. It's had a rough couple of years, as many communities have, but it's coming back. And honestly, I never thought about going to network as a goal for me. I'm someone who really enjoys having a home nest, my own space. So I like being able to go to work and see the same folks every day, come home to my place every day. I have some friends who do work for national news networks, and as correspondents, they are typically based in one city. So they might be based in New York or Philadelphia or Chicago, but a couple days a week, or sometimes more than that, they are on a plane headed to wherever the big national story is happening. Mm-hmm. And while that, fuels them and it's what they love, I like having just a little more stability in my day to day. So I'll probably stay at the local level. It's really nice to get to connect and really feel like you're a part of the community.
Yeah, that's cool. So you mentioned, in your bio mentioned Florida, Oregon, both coasts. You talked a little bit about the weather, but what other adjustments were there for you? Going from Florida, you mentioned small town news and small town I don't know. I laugh and I think of Parks and Rec, if you've ever watched that, and Pawnee, and the little things that would happen that were a big deal, that was their news. Yeah, what adjustments did you have to make? What adjustments were impacted you going from coast to coast?
Well, one of the biggest things going from Florida to Oregon, out here to a bigger city, was realizing parking is a premium here. Driving around, in Florida, everybody drives everywhere and everything has a parking lot. So driving my car around and having to brush up on my parallel parking skills, or just having to decide if it was worth driving somewhere for the day, or if I could take the train, or, just stuff like that. But I think that was probably more of just a smaller to bigger city adjustment than anything else. For me, I moved out here not knowing anyone. I took a chance on this job, but I think there's two things that made that move a pretty smooth adjustment for me. The first being that I did grow up a military brat, and I have moved before and could do it again, and have learned to just, appreciate the positive sides of really kind of blank slate, starting over somewhere new and putting yourself out there and meeting people. But also, this industry, like I said, is pretty small, and you get to know folks even outside of your own station. So I know anyone who's seen Anchorman probably thinks of that back alley fight that all the news stations get into. I can tell you, I have never done that. I have never, swung brass knuckles at anybody in an alley because they're the competition. That has not happened. I got to meet a lot of the other reporters here in town who are often like me, younger professionals in their 20s or 30s. They've moved around as well, and you have these shared experiences from work. So some of my closest friends here in town are anchors and reporters at other stations, and building that kind of instant community really makes a place feel like home pretty quickly.
Okay, between Fox 12, K2, you guys, KGW, which one's the best one?
For in terms of on air?
Who would win in a back alley fight?
Yeah, who would win?
Who would win in a fight? I don't know. I think Fox has a few more people on staff, so they have the number advantage. But I feel like Coin could be pretty scrappy if we had to. I think K2 is the wild card. I don't know.
All right, chalk that up, Justin. Keep note.
Will do. Taking notes. I had a question. It seems like with being on TV every day and being so connected to your community, that you'd be very recognizable to thousands and thousands of people around you. What's that like? Is it hard? Is it hard to make friends? Is it hard to the dating world, that kind of thing? Give me your experiences.
It's interesting for sure. It depends. I think it depends on where you go. I can go out to a bar where if it's mostly mostly 20 and 30 somethings in the bar, I probably won't get recognized because quite honestly, a lot of kids, I say kids, a lot of people my age, you know, a lot of the younger folks don't watch as much local news day to day. They tend to get a lot of their news online, or they might be, you know, on our website, but they're reading the article. They're not going to watch the 2 hours of television in the morning. So some people do, but usually if I'm out with a younger crowd, not going to get recognized as much. It's always the days when I'm in the grocery store and I have no makeup on and my hair's in a baseball cap and I've got like a hoodie and Crocs and like without fail, someone will recognize. Then like from down the aisle, I'm like, how did you even? I look nothing like myself, but I've learned to. It kind of threw me off at first, the first couple of years, but I enjoy it now. And honestly, unless I'm just having a real bad day, I welcome the opportunity to say hi and meet a viewer face to face, or anyone who maybe they're not a regular viewer, maybe they just recognize me on the news. But I think having that moment to actually stop and look someone in the eye and say, hey, it's nice to meet you. And have them see like, I'm out buying my, you know, pasta sauce just like the rest of them. And like, I'm a human too. Like I enjoy those humanizing moments. I get to connect with folks at a lot of community events, you know, different 5Ks, benefit concerts, things like that. And I just think that's a great opportunity for people to realize that, you know, the media in big quotes is in some cases just your neighbor who's also a member of this community.
That's the take-home point for today. News anchors buy pasta sauce too.
I can't remember the last time I made my own. Sometimes the week just gets busy.
Totally fair. You know, Emily, one of the reasons why we wanted to have you on the show, like one of the reasons it popped up in my head was, one, you, again, having me on and seeing how much like mental health was something that was important to you and something that you want to, information that you want shared with the masses, and also seeing like on your own social media posts that you've talked about and you've been open about living with depression and anxiety. Like, can you talk to us a little bit about that? Like when you were first diagnosed, what were things like leading up to it? We've talked about it a lot on our show of like sometimes like we don't necessarily know what's going on, and we're trying to cope with what's happening. We're trying to do the best we can living our life, and we just don't know that there's an answer behind all the symptoms and things we're dealing with. So I guess to repeat the question, because I keep talking every time I'm about to ask a question, what was that like for you? Like when you were first diagnosed, and then what were things like for you leading up to a diagnosis?
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I love talking about this now. And one of the biggest reasons is because I feel like I didn't have that many people to talk about it. You know, some of the years that I was really struggling, I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression a couple years ago. Gosh, it would have been, well, end of 2020. So not until I, you know, moved to Portland, I had been in my career professionally on, you know, by all external appearances, succeeding, you know, in my life for, you know, over a decade. But behind the scenes, I was pretty stressed and some days were pretty tough. And there were a few things that I think got me to a breaking point. First being, as a journalist, you know, in my professional world, in my years as a reporter, these days I sit behind the desk, but for many years I was going out responding to breaking news. You think about things like car crashes, house fires, shootings. Some stories are good, but some of those stories are really, really tough. And oftentimes you're showing up to, I want to say this the right way. A lot of the news that we cover is great and positive, but some stories, those breaking news days, fires, car crashes, shootings, that's really hard. You're showing up as a reporter, walking into the worst day of someone's life. And there's a lot of trauma that I don't think I was really aware of, the things that were happening around me that I was also internalizing. You know, you tell yourself, oh, it's work, it's my job, I'm going to compartmentalize it, shut that part of my brain off when I'm done for my day. But you're a human, and that stuff sticks with you. And over time, I think that built up after several years. The other thing, you know, that we all know happened in 2020, the pandemic hit. Things got pretty stressful for a lot of folks, and the world around us changed. I was so fortunate to still have a job and have a lot of my day-to-day remain the same, but it was a really stressful time. I went through a pretty significant breakup after moving to Portland that was tough for me personally as well. And then really the thing that was the tipping point for me, I think, was a huge personal loss for my family. My younger brother actually passed away in 2020, unrelated to the pandemic, but he was 26 years old and had just a cardiac event, and it was horrible for our family, and it was also really difficult to be dealing with a loss that was so different from what the rest of the world was also experiencing in terms of loss and some of the trauma of COVID-19. So just layers and layers of isolation that really felt like they were compounding on a stressful work environment, and just trying to keep pushing forward, pretend like nothing's wrong, everything's fine. You know, I started to, even before my brother died, I was noticing my relationships at work were strained. I had a short fuse. The cameras were on and I was smiling, but behind the scenes, there were days where I was not a fun person to be around. And any little thing that would go wrong on air, would go wrong on the show, which when you're working in live television happens every day. You know, things go unplanned. It would derail my whole day. And it got to a point where I realized, you know, my behavior, my attitude, just the way that I was feeling on a daily basis was just untenable. And then when my brother passed away, I knew that I needed to reach out right then and there and get help before I got to a point where reaching out to try and get help was even going to feel too difficult. So I found a therapist. I was actually still home in Florida with my family at the time, after my brother had passed. And then I found a therapist in Portland and set up an appointment for when I got back, and started therapy when I got back here. And a couple months into therapy, started to peel back some layers. You know, obviously I was dealing with my brother's death and some immediate depression and grief from that. But then also starting to look back at the last few years and even my life back to high school, and realizing, gosh, I was that kid that always chalked it up to being a perfectionist, chalked it up to having really high expectations for myself and others, right? And you put some of these patterns together and realize, oh my gosh, I have been setting some really unrealistic standards for myself for a long time, that are really stemming from some pretty deep-rooted anxiety. And I think it had snowballed to a point where it forced me to deal with it. And I'm so glad that I did, because I, started therapy, noticed, some improvement just from being able to talk about it and try to actually vocalize what I was feeling internally. I started medication. I started a generic of Lexapro. So now I take a daily medication for depression and anxiety, and anyone who has taken SSRIs knows that usually it takes a while to really kind of start up. So after a couple of weeks, all of a sudden I just started to notice that I was feeling like myself again. And I had a conversation with a friend, and I tried to kind of explain it to her. And I said, I almost feel like for the last couple of years, my baseline had been so low, and I needed something good to happen to me each day to bring that baseline up. Now I feel like my baseline, I start each day so high, and things can go wrong, that I might dip down, but I can come back up again. I feel like I'm back in a good spot where I used to be. And she got emotional. I got emotional. She's like, I'm just so happy to see you happy. Like this, I'm so glad to see you back. And I realized, I'm like, there aren't as many stories out there, I don't think, of people who hit a road bump, hit a hard time, found resources or had someone reach out to them, were able to get the help they need and saw an improvement. I had only ever heard kind of scary stories or horror stories. And I understand I am very lucky here in the experience that I had, having a medication work for me and not having to go through a very difficult trial and error. But I think one of the reasons that I was so worried about reaching out for help for so long was that I had not had these conversations with people, anyone else telling me like, yeah, I had a tough time and I got help. And as I started opening up to more people in my inner circle, to friends and family, I heard from more people, oh yeah, I've been on an antidepressant for 3 years. Oh yeah, I took some back in college. I had a member of my immediate family say, yeah, I took some for a couple of years. I grew up, I had no idea, you know? And so that's kind of what prompted me to be a little more outspoken and to use the platform that I do have in news and in media. Because if my story hits one person and makes them think, oh gosh, maybe that's kind of where I'm at, or I'm glad that she was able to find help. Maybe there's help out there for me. Then I want to do that.
Yes.
I think,
Thank
yes.
you.
That was I'm sorry, that was a very long-winded answer.
No. Sorry, Justin, I'm going to cut you off for a little bit. Thank you. First, like, a million times, thank you for sharing that. You're sharing, like, your high school experience, and, like, even going back that far of, like, how much you were able to not cover up, but, like, maybe just, like, deal with stuff enough to be like, yeah, this is normal, this is okay, like, this is just how things are. Like, I just wish, like, so many of the kids that I talked to at the high school that I'm at, like, would understand, or, like, would get to hear it. And I mean, that's why we put this stuff out, so that people can hear it. It's like, sometimes it is the way that we've been used to living our life, like, is not maybe the best all the time. And, like, at some point, our body and our mind is going to decide for us that it's time that we get help. And for some people, they're able to do it for days, weeks, months, years, decades. And then at some point, it really does come to an end where, you know, we need to try something different. So, and I really appreciate you sharing that, like, for a long time, hearing, like, the horror stories of, like, maybe it doesn't get better, or the medication is tough, or my damn psychiatrist, is not giving me those meds. Like, and I appreciate you sharing that, but also sharing, like, but it did end up working out, and it was helpful, and it's still helpful. So
I think
you.
it's almost kind of the same thing as, like, you know, customer reviews. You're so much more likely to be vocal and get online and talk about something if you had a bad experience. And, you know, not as often do you get on and say, like, oh, I went to this restaurant and it was fine, no complaints, you know? So that's where it's like, you know, you tend to hear a lot of, like, the worst case scenarios. And I don't want to in any way negate those experiences, because that's horrible. And I hope that everyone who is struggling is able to find help that works for them. But at the same time, there is this silent group out there who, you know, needed some help and got some help, and it's working, and they're great. And you don't always see the struggle that got them there. And I wanted to be that narrative that I wished I'd had those years when I was struggling, and should have reached out, but felt like, well, everyone around me seems like they're fine, so I'm fine. I'll keep pushing, you know?
Yeah.
I love the point you made too, where you said the Lexapro or escitalopram, the generic name, psychiatrist here, it helped you get back up to your normal. But in therapy, that's where you really started working on some of the things that led to the depression and the anxiety. And that is such a beautiful point, because it's something I tell my patients all the time, is that the medicine's supposed to help you get feeling better sooner. And then therapy is really where you start working on it, where you start understanding why you got that way, how to fix those things. You mentioned that you had a lot of perfectionistic tendencies, and in the United States, that is glorified. Perfectionists are told, oh, well, you're the ones who are going to be successful. You're the ones who can do well in business, who can do well in TV, because you're going to sacrifice a little bit of yourself to make sure that your product, what you're putting out, is acceptable, is up to your standards.
Right.
So you're valuable to other people. But my question is, along those lines, so what else have you learned about yourself that maybe you found in therapy that helped you make some of those changes? And then two-part question, how have people responded to your story? Because yes, we do tend to hear more of the negative stuff. How about when they hear the positive stuff? What's your experience been?
Sure. So I guess I want to start with that, because when I first posted a few things on social media and on TV and kind of opened up about it a little more, it all kind of stemmed from an offhand comment that I had made just in conversation on the morning show. We had been in the middle of a live interview, and it was something related to mental health. And I just mentioned very conversationally in the interview, like, I think this is it was talking about some new treatment for treatment-resistant depression. And I had made a point to say, like, I just think it's great that there's another resource out there, you know, as someone who has dealt with anxiety and depression and has found a treatment that worked for them. I want that for other people. Moved on. Like, it asked my next question. Like, it was that quick.
Yeah.
And I got several emails from viewers, more than a typical response of, hey, I noticed you said that you have depression on TV. I had no idea. Like that really stood out to me. Thank you so much for talking about this. And I was like, wow, I barely talked about it. So that, that got me thinking. I was like, okay, I'm going to put this out there for folks and see what resonates. And I was blown away by the response that it got. Hundreds of comments on Facebook and Instagram and emails from viewers who reached out and said, I've struggled with this for a long time. I had no idea that this was something you dealt with. Just thank you for sharing. All the way up to someone saying, my daughter saw this video. I posted a video on Facebook. My daughter saw this video and sent this to me, and it made me realize that I need to reach out and ask for help. And, people saying that they were going to reach out and that it was what they needed to seek therapy or to maybe not be so afraid of medication. And that, to me, I'm like sitting at my computer, just like bawling, reading some of these messages from people. I just had no idea. And from that point on, I was like, okay, I will talk to anyone who has questions from here on out, because I just think it should not be, mental health should not be stigmatized. It should not be so difficult to talk about. It should be no different from, telling someone like, oh my gosh, I was down all weekend with the worst head cold, So that's been the response, and I'm happy to do it. In terms of other things that I've learned, boy, we've really had fun unpacking productivity anxiety and just that the stress, right? To your point of just like being, to your point, Justin, of being in America and hustle culture, strive for perfection. The grind is so idealized, girl boss, all of this stuff, right? Just unpacking that and really being able to take a step back and look at like, but for what, and that's not to say that you shouldn't still take pride in your work and strive to do a good job. But at what point do you give yourself a little grace? My therapist will sit there and say, you just rattled off your day after complaining that you felt like you weren't productive enough. And like that, you just listed so many things, she's like, if any of your friends told you that they just had that day, would you look at them and say, you were kind of lazy today. You need to, you need to do a little more. So if you wouldn't talk to your friends like that, why are you talking to yourself that way? It's like, wow. Okay. Yeah. So that's been really helpful. Especially, in a career that is so tied into social media and public appearance, and there's always someone next to you getting a big story, winning an award, increasing their social media presence on top of their game, right? It's so easy to play the comparison game, and just learning to cut myself some slack has been good.
Yes. Oh, okay. Two things. First, thank you for making our job easier. Just by you talking about your own experiences and how you've gone to one place, come back from it, learned to kind of cope with these things.
Yeah.
You sharing that it makes our job easier. People getting to hear that story is so important and so helpful. And we've talked on the show of like just the idea of normalization. Just makes things easier for people. It makes it, like you said, mental health should not be stigmatized. It shouldn't be. Same thing with like people who get treatment in the past and then they complete and then they feel like they can't go back. Like when you go to therapy, you don't get like a punch card that says like, all right, you're done for the year. Like, no, you can come back whenever. You can come back in 2 weeks. Like
right.
It's just so great to hear a positive story like that. And then your other piece of just like unpacking all these things when it comes to like productivity and the shitty culture that we have in terms of like work and having to do certain things and tying our almost like our self-worth to what we're doing and what we're gaining and experiencing. It is so toxic that we have to deal with that, and our kids have to deal with that. And but yeah, those are two things I wanted to touch on. Thank you. For sure.
One of the pieces of advice that my therapist gave me that I love was, she told me one day, she said, stop shoulding on yourself. And I said, pardon me? Come again? She's like, stop shoulding on yourself. We do this where we get in our head and we're like, oh my gosh, like I should have gotten up earlier because then I could have gotten a better workout in. I should have packed my lunch last night because then I wouldn't be getting a drive-through lunch. I should have, worked a little harder yesterday. It's like it's this constant retroactive list in your mind of like all these things you should have done, like, or you could have worked hard. It's like, like, where does that get you? You know, it doesn't improve your productivity. It just makes you feel worse about yourself. So when you start to hear those thoughts, you know, recognizing that thought pattern, putting a lid on it, and taking a minute to stop and just look at, okay, but like, look at all the things that I did do today. And even if it is, you got out of bed, brushed your teeth, and made your bed, you know, despite struggling with depression right now, you know, or you had a terrible night of sleep and you're still at work and you smiled at your coworkers today. Just learning to give yourself some kudos for the things that you are doing, and stop the negativity, because what's going on in your head does vibrate out to folks around you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I really like, that, similar to that, like telling students of like, what you've said of like you wouldn't talk to your friend like that. You wouldn't like, if they told you all these things, you wouldn't should on them. Or is it shit on them?
Right.
Like, you wouldn't do that to them. So it's like definitely like cutting yourself some slack, being like your own, you have to be like your own cheerleader.
Right.
Like you have to, like, cause a lot of the times, like, someone else is not, unfortunately someone else won't do it for us. Like,
right.
If we can do it for ourselves, we're not always as dependent on validation from other people or from other outside sources that really aren't as important. Like, if we're able to support ourselves and be our own number one fan, then that's more than enough. And the piece that you said of like, if the best you can do is get out of bed, you brush your teeth, you make your bed, you eat for the day, that's totally fine too. Like, I tell students all the time, like, all that I ask of you is that you do the best that you can that day. If your best is that you crush everything, you get everything done off your list, cool.
Yeah.
If your best is like you just made it to school and you just got the assignments for the day and then you took them home, that's cool too. So.
Right. You wouldn't look at your friend and say, oh yeah, you should have studied so much harder for that test last week. It's like, no, if your friend was telling you like, oh, I didn't do so well, you'd probably look at them and say, yeah, and remember you were struggling with some test taking anxiety and you got in a fight with your sister the night before, and you know, like, you had other things going on, or you had to stay late at your job. Like, remember all the other things that you were also dealing with. Like, don't sit here and say, oh, you should have done this, because you were doing the best you were doing the best you could in the moment with the circumstances that you were faced with. And just always being mindful of that. You know, as circumstances change, don't look back at your old self and judge the actions that were taken when the circumstances were different.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Justin.
And you mentioned therapy and medications. And yes, we harp on that in the mental health world, that those are two very important things. And the combination of therapy and medications is more powerful than individually. But you've also talked about hiking, being outdoors. And it sounds like life as a news anchor, especially life as a news anchor who hosts a morning show, it's stressful. And the hours are bananas, and sleep is a premium. What are some of the non-therapy, non-medication things that you have found that has been helpful for your own mental health?
Yeah. Oh, so many things. And one of the things I will say too that was so helpful in starting medication was, you know, to your earlier point, Justin, it brought me back to that baseline where I was then able to go and re-engage with some of those activities that can be so beneficial for our mental health. So sometimes you need that extra boost to get there and get that momentum going. But one of the things that makes such a big difference for me is getting enough sleep. And as frustrating as it is so true. Having good sleep hygiene. I mean, I roll my eyes at this stuff, but it is so true. I actually set a timer on my phone, especially during the summer here, because Oregon summers, you have amazing sunshine and beautiful weather until, you know, 9:30 at night, 10 o'clock at night, right? Which is wonderful if you don't have to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. But when my alarm goes off at 2 a.m., I have got to find a way to sleep when it's light out. So I have blackout shades on every window of my condo, and I have an alarm on my phone set for 4:30 p.m. to remind me to close the shades and make it darker in here a couple hours before I need to wind down and go to bed. I try really hard to stop scrolling TikTok, which is such a challenge. But I really do try to kind of unwind and start to turn down from social media. I have some really cute blue light blocker glasses that are just a trip. That there's these big giant goggles so I put on my blue light blockers. I try to, avoid some of the blue light and start to wind down. Reading before bed is such a great, for whatever reason, that just, it helps me just like conk out for the night. So doing all those things, just really prioritizing sleep. And that was one of the things that, as I have learned to better manage my anxiety, I am able to close the laptop and say, those half a dozen emails that I did not get to today will be there tomorrow. They no longer keep me up at night the way they used to. So just learning to manage some of the day-to-day workload in a way that is manageable long-term, and prioritizing that time for yourself and sleep and rest. It's so important. Prioritizing working out and staying active. I started getting into Pure Barre, which is kind of a mix of like yoga, Pilates, and dance. It's a fun workout, and I started teaching it because I actually realized I tried to kind of trick my brain. I was like, because I realized that I am a workaholic and I do have a tendency to be a perfectionist. If I make working out my job, then I will also do that more. So that one got some raised eyebrows from my therapist, but I have actually made it work for me, and she's come around to the idea. She was like, okay, I'll let you try this approach. You let me know. She's like, why are you going to add one more thing to your schedule? I'm like, I know, but actually, viewing it as a job. I teach a couple classes a week, and then because I want to be a good teacher, I need to go take the other classes and work on my form and stay physically fit. So, really, I think treating working out like a job, and it doesn't have to be a group fitness class. If you enjoy going for a run on the riverfront, if you enjoy going to the gym and lifting weights, if you enjoy dancing around your living room for 20 minutes a day, whatever movement feels good to you, making that a priority and scheduling it in your day like a job. I mean, that's, you're working for yourself and paying yourself dividends in that way. So I think working out and sleep are super, super big for me. Also just being mindful of, alcohol and caffeine and stuff like that. Just day to day, that stuff can catch up with you. So learning to, at the end of a stressful day, not automatically reach for a glass of wine, make sure that I'm just being mindful of when I'm drinking and why, and when I'm eating and why. And if there's an emotional component tied to that, just taking a moment to kind of stop and think like, okay, let's dig into that a little bit. What's going on? Is there another kinder way that I could help myself in this moment?
About 3 years ago, Justin and I were doing an episode, and we talked about sleep, and I made a comment about well, it's not like anyone our age really gets that much sleep anyway. And Justin was like, actually, I make sure I sleep like 8 or 9 hours a night. And from then on, I was like, damn, I really got to work on my shit, because I got shaped by Justin.
What's that like?
Unintentionally.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And so from then on, seriously, from then I was like, damn, I should really be sleeping. And that's been a huge difference for me. We also have one of our friends who's been on the show a few times. Her name is Dr. Kristen Casey. She's a sleep psychologist. She has talked to us about the importance of sleep, and you mentioned sleep hygiene, how important that is. I really like too your point of alcohol. I didn't really know how much alcohol can impact my sleep until hearing from Justin, hearing from our friend Dr. Kristen Casey, and I have pretty much I've started to be mindful of, if I'm gonna have a drink tonight, is it really worth my sleep being off just for the one drink?
Right.
Maybe not. So I've pretty much I feel like there's almost maybe a shift. I don't want to speak for everybody, but one of my friends, we don't drink much at all. We drink Lagunitas Brewery makes this hop water.
Oh, nice.
That's kind of tastes like a seltzer, but it's basically just a bubbly or a LaCroix. But just doing that instead of drinking, and we still get the positive reinforcement of drinking without the messed up sleep cycle that alcohol gives us.
Yeah. Being mindful of just are you drinking because you're bored? Are you drinking because it's a social thing? Is it, sometimes it's just the simple act of having something in your hand when you're sitting there talking with friends, and it can very easily be water. Sometimes I'll put bubbly water in a wine glass just because drinking out of a fancy glass. It's I don't know if it's scientific, but I think that drinking out of a fancy glass makes things taste better. So just, just finding little ways to kind of break up those habits or just be mindful of it, I think is important.
Now I'm just picturing you.
What's the science, Justin?
Yeah.
Now I'm picturing you with a wine glass full of bubbly and your big blue blocking goggles on, just sitting there at night in full darkness.
I was gonna say, can you see in here right now? Because that was literally me last night. That was on the couch watching Ted Lasso.
Inside.
Yep.
Oh man, the new season's been pretty good. I got to
love
catch up on the new episode.
Well, I'm looking at our script. We had should we do the last two? Should we jump to the last one? What do you think, Justin?
We're at 45 minutes. Let's wrap it up. Yeah. I think we've gotten a lot of great info from you, Emily.
We could keep talking forever, but Emily, thank you again for being on the show. I want to finish the questions with this last one, and I feel like we're going to get a good answer. But what message do you hope that your viewers get from you through the work that you do?
I hope that they see authenticity. I don't think that you get that from everyone on TV and in media. And I think I do think, if there are silver linings to kind of come out of the pandemic and this rise of social media, and in particular TikTok, I love how authentic Gen Z and some of these younger kids are being on social media. They've grown up with all of this around them. It's always been a part of their world. And I see less of a need to put on a front in various facets of their life. I try to bring that, into my job as well. Obviously, there are things about being a professional news anchor. I'm still going to present professionally, but I do try to find moments in my day and in connecting with viewers online where what you see is what you get. This is me. This is my thoughts. I'm just connecting with you, human to human. And I hope that empowers other people to feel more authentic in their lives, to feel like they do have people out there that they can reach out to and connect with. If I'm able to be a positive force in someone else's life, then my job is worth it.
Cool. Thank you so much. Thank you again for being on the show. We're going to go to Justin now. It's take-home point time. What do you have for us, Justin?
I want to repeat what Emily said and say, don't should on yourself, because that's a lovely point. And actually, we have a good friend of the show, Andy Kep, who has the Millennial, Money in the Mind podcast. That's us. But yeah, he always would tell me, don't should your pants. So that was his take on it. a little more crass, perhaps.
Nice.
But
and graphic.
Yeah, very graphic. I love the visual. But Money in the Mind has finished. They released their final episode. So wanted to just show love and give a shout out to Andy and Aaron, the hosts of that show. We were on it a couple of times, and just say au revoir. It has been an honor to work with you guys, and don't should your pants.
My take-home point is going to be that news anchors and reporters buy pasta sauce too, and there are people just like you and I, and they're I'm going to leave it at that. Emily, do you have one last take-home point for us before we do our outro?
Oh man, yeah. I hope this podcast was as fun to listen to as it was to record. I really enjoyed getting to talk with you guys, and anytime I get to be a little less filtered and a little more real is time well spent. So I really enjoy having these conversations. If anyone wants to continue the conversation, I think I'm at Emily Burris on most social media stuff. So feel free to connect with me and say hey.
Perfect. We'll add that stuff to the show notes too, so people can have access to it. You can reach out to Emily. With that, I will give you our same outro that we do every single episode. Wherever you listen to your podcast, you can find us there, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever other platforms there are. On Apple Podcasts, if you'd like, you can leave us a 5-star review and a comment that we can read at some point in the future. On Spotify, you can leave us a 5-star review and I guess a question feature too that I still don't know how we would answer it if you left us a question, but feel free to leave us a question if you'd like. On social media, at Millennial MHC. that is everything that I have. Justin, I think that's everything you have. Emily, thank you again so much for being on the show. And as always, everyone, take care of y'all mentals.